The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. You're here with us at the Charlotte Podcast Festival, Charlotte's first podcast festival, presented by WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the Queen City Podcast Network, Blumenthal Performing Arts, and Eclecs Creative Agency. We are here this hour because we're wanting to make sure you have the best experience, the most information, the most inspiration, and connections with podcasters from around the world to be able to bring your podcast to life, and especially for this hour session about bringing your podcast to life with monetary support, with donations, with listener funding sources. So before we get started, hello. I'm your moderator for the next hour. My name is Joni Deutsch. I'm one of the folks leading the Charlotte Podcast Festival. I work at WFAE as the podcast lead there, which is, again, Charlotte's NPR news source. I'm also host of the award-winning Amplifier Music podcast. Obviously, if you're knowing anything about NPR and public radio, we have a thing for membership. We have a thing for pledge drives. We have a thing where we're asking you to make a donation in any amount to get a tote bag by calling 1-800-743-5252. That's my pledge drive voice. But all that to say, we're here for this next hour because we want to make sure that you are given realistic expectations of what it takes to be able to create a listener-funded model for your production. Look, we all know we would love it if we didn't have to say anything and people just threw money at us, right? We want our content to speak for itself and sell itself without us having to do anything. But realistically, that's just not the case. We have to make the ask, and we have to create a strategy and a community in order to have that ask be heard and well received. So that's what we're doing this next hour. Again, just some little things. You're more than welcome to put questions in the comment box. We'll be going through audience questions throughout the hour. So any question that you have about Patreon, about PayPal, about listener funding sources for podcasts, making the ask, no questions too big, no questions too small, and feel free to put it in the Zoom chat. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our very accomplished, award-winning, chart-topping panel of Charlotte area audio makers who are going to share their insight about how they've been able to connect and call on their listeners to show monetary support for podcasts. So let's introduce our panel. Stuart Watson is a three-time, not one, two, but three-time Peabody award-winning investigative reporter who broke big stories for more than 20 years in journalism. After spending many years in his career talking, he's now the host of the podcast Man Listening, which elevates the stories of women. Stuart's also the author of the forthcoming book, What She Said and What I Heard, How One Man Shut Up and Started Listening. You can see it on the screen right there. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for being here. And of course, Stuart's not the only person who's going to share his experience of using Patreon and encouraging donations to podcasting. We're also joined by an amazing duo, husband-wife duo, the co-host of the long-standing podcast, The Black Guy Who Tips, based right here in Charlotte. They've been praised and featured practically everywhere. HBO, the Huffington Post, BET.com, New York Times, you name it. They're consistently one of the top-ranking comedy podcasts, and because of their immensely supportive community, of which we know there are some people in the comments right now that are huge fans of The Black Guy Who Tips, because of this community, Spotify has taken notice. And as of this week, today is what, the third day, 2.5 days? This week, The Black Guy Who Tips is officially a Spotify exclusive podcast. They got on Spotify's radar. Spotify wanted them in, and now they're exclusively on podcast. The same list of exclusive podcasts as Michelle Obama, Joe Rogan, and not that many more. So Rod and Karen Morrow are joining us too. Hello, Rod and Karen.
Hey,
Hi, everybody.
You. What a great
I
intro.
know. We sound like we somebody.
You are somebody. We are nobodies compared to you all. But in all honesty, everyone here is a somebody. Everyone in the audience is somebody. We all are different somebodies. So hopefully today's hour is going to give everyone some amount of insight, whether you are a new podcaster, a veteran podcaster, a podcaster in a genre where you talk about Pez dispensers, whatever the case may be. We're going to give you some tips about how you can still encourage donations to your production. So with that said, some housekeeping things before we get into the conversation. We're going to have a great conversation today. We look forward to answering your audience questions. The only thing is we're going to ask that you remain muted, audience. So make sure you keep the mute button on your audio throughout the session, but feel free to use our Zoom chat box, ask questions, connect with one another. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible this hour. We can't guarantee everything. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. A reminder that today's session is being recorded, as are all the other sessions from this month. The Charlotte Podcast Festival has been going on for nearly 4 weeks with free and virtual sessions for all. So just know that this session being recorded and the other ones will be made available at the end of this month. Keep an eye on your email, and that includes your spam, your junk, and promotion folder for the recording as soon as it's available. Another thing too is that we are in the final week. There's still a few more sessions left on how to monetize your podcast, create budgets, be a long-standing program. We hope to see you at those sessions. They're free to register. Go to charlottepodcastfestival.com and register now. Don't forget. So that said, we're going to get started. So Rod and Karen, I'm going to start off with you all as we get into the questions and the conversation. So the Black IU Tips did not begin on the first day in the first year as a listener-funded podcast. It actually took you all about 5 years to make your first ask for listener support. So tell us a little bit about those first 5 years in making the show and what finally spurred you all to think, okay, I should make the ask of the audience to donate.
Well, when we first started, like almost 11 years ago, there weren't that many podcasts, and there wasn't really that many ways to even give to a podcast, to sponsor or whatever. And so what we did was, I want to say maybe a year in, maybe shorter than that, some fans were like, y'all should allow us to maybe donate to the show, because they were hearing the audio quality and
it wasn't that great.
Yeah, they could tell we needed some upgrades. And so we started like taking what we call donations
through PayPal.
Through PayPal.
Yes.
We still do it today. And we turned it into a little game. And like whenever we did like a segment where we would read the names of the people who donated to the show, and we would play like this church music under it and make it sound like it was like tithes and offerings.
Yes.
And it really caught on. And so that was like one revenue stream, and it was enough. It wasn't like enough for us to obviously live on or anything, but it was enough for us to do stuff like
buy new mics.
Yeah, buy a mixer, buy a new computer.
Camcorder.
Yeah. And all that stuff increases what the audience is getting anyway, so they could feel the money, like they could, they're like, oh like, yeah,
we're getting a return on our investment.
You're not recording in a cave anymore. Okay. So
it don't sound like you're underwater.
So then, like, I want to say 5 years in, I got laid off of my job for the second time, different job. And it was basically like Karen said, listen, we need to try to monetize this thing into a living.
Because we have been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, as a podcaster, I feel like just because you haven't monetized yet doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about it. We were thinking about it from day one.
Yes.
But so once that happened, we were like, okay, how much money do we need? Blah, blah, blah. And that's when we kind of broke down like our plan for that. So our ask was really just more like desperation. It was like North Carolina says, listen, I believe at that time they changed the law to where unemployment went from 2 years to 6 months.
Yes, it did.
So, and I think my severance at that job was like either 4 or 6 weeks of severance. So it was like, we have to get this popping in about like 7.5 months, or else we're on the street. So I think that was the key to the ask, was pure desperation.
Well, I think there's a few different call outs that, Rod, you're just sharing. One of which is that even if you don't feel like this is a business, you're investing your time in it. Everyone's investing our time in making this. Even if we technically consider it a hobby or a passion project, your time is valuable. You need to put import on that. And also, on what you want the experience to be like for your audience. So I think another call out too is the fact that you all immediately invested that money into the equipment to make it a better production, or a production that is, for the community, by the community. So another call out for the audience and what you all are sharing is that don't make it a nebulous gray statement of we need your money, period, and we're not going to tell you what it's used for, or if you're going to see the dividends of it or the results of you making a donation. No, be transparent. Show them like your donation was able to help us in getting this awesome audio equipment or video equipment or a new social media marketer or a live event that we're hosting in your honor as an audience. So again, for the audience out there, think about it. What is it that you can tie a donation to show like this is exactly the amount of money we need, or just money that we need, and it's going to go back into the production, so people don't feel like they're just donating and not seeing any part or worth of it. So Rod and Care, with that said, the other question I'd have for you all, and something we're getting in, is that you all aren't solely a listener-supported podcast. You have other sources of revenue. So tell us a little bit about that process of not only being membership run or donation based, but also having the other revenue split, and what percentage that kind of comes out to.
Now, Roger, we probably can talk about more about percentage, but with the donations and having people give, one thing we would kind of make jokes out of it, like when people give, like Roger said, we would shout them out. I remember the funnest one is when we got a soundboard and we were able to make like sound effects. The whole show was us just playing the sound effects and joking with the audience, but like, y'all pay for this, waka, 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 all the dings and bings. We were just doing everything that the soundboard could do. And I think the more the audience sees that their money is going somewhere, the more that they're willing to give. And also you want the audience to feel like they're giving for a good cause versus they're giving out of obligation. Because some people make it, they almost put a call out that, oh, well, if you give, it's okay. No, let the audience knows that it's an investment. Don't be ashamed of your product and what you're doing. And a lot of people feel like this asking is begging. It's not really begging, because just because it's free to the audience, it costs you money. You have to purchase mics. You have to purchase it's a sunken cost for you. And so if people really love something, they are willing to give. And also we have sponsors that we've gotten over the years. And a lot of our sponsors actually listened to the show and said, I want to sponsor. That's how we found our first sponsors. They listened to us. They were fans of us and were like, we want to sponsor. As time went on, we got sponsors from other places. But like those are our we're actually three main sources of revenues.
Yeah. So percentage wise, I would say it varies, right? Like,
yes,
we hustle, right? So this is like you always have to have like an iron in different pots. And for us, we've had sponsors such as like Adam and Eve that sponsored us from like almost inception of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They reached out and were immediately like, we want to be a part of this. And they sponsored us all the way up until we had to move exclusive to Spotify. So like that's a 10-year relationship. And so that was nice, and it was a small, like the percentage obviously changed over the years. Like at first it was like, wow, this is 90% of our budget, and now,
yes.
To now where we're like, this is 2% of our budget or whatever. But that was a good sponsor. We had, at some point we had Loot Crate, Bevel, and a couple other ones. And that year or two, they probably accounted for about 40% of our revenue, where it was like, we can depend on this. Now, the thing with sponsors, obviously, and advertisers is the campaigns come and go.
Yes.
So you don't want to get too reliant on revenue where you don't know it's coming back. Your fans are much more reliable.
Mm-hmm.
So like we would budget off of, we know what our fans will do. We never budgeted off of, like the advertising stuff was always like, oh, cool, that's a bonus, just in case, during the run with Loot Crate, they literally declared bankruptcy.
Yes.
So like there was like last few months of that contract we never got our money for. So exactly. So you can't really depend on that money. You hope you can, but you can't really depend on it as an independent contractor.
Yeah, and also there's easier ways. When we first started, there wasn't a road, but now they have like places you can Google and you have like whole companies, but their whole thing is to get you advertisement.
Podcorn is a great example. there's even podcast platforms now like Anchor and stuff that like kind of encourage and allow advertising and relationships with advertisers and product and placement. And there's a podcast, sites now that also do this like cross promotional stuff where you know I say I want to come on your show, you come on mine. So like there's a lot more avenues than when we jumped in. Now.
And actually to that point, Rod, again, for those just joining us, we're with Rod and Karen from the Black Guy Who Tips, and they've been around for years and years and years and years, more than a decade. Rod and Karen, at the point that you started asking for donations, there wasn't even really a Patreon at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Stuart. And of course, Stuart Watson, for those who weren't with us at the start of the session, he is the host of Man Listening. He's a Peabody Award-winning investigative reporter, and now he does a podcast where it's amplifying the voices of women and their stories. So Stuart, tell us a little bit about why you chose Patreon to be your platform for encouraging donations to your podcast production.
Because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I am the opposite of Rod. You know, they have been at it. They're pros. I came out of the broadcast world. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I'm trying to figure this thing out. And I think a lot of us are trying to figure this thing out. I think everybody thinks, I'm going to get up there. I'm going to be making that Joe Rogan money. I'm going to be up there with Rod. Rod's not just going to be paying the tip. He's going to be paying the whole tab. You know, I'm going out after this, y'all. I want to know where the green room is for this thing. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I still don't exactly know what the hell I'm doing. I'm figuring it out. The one thing that I would say, there've been a number of things already in the chat about when do you go out and ask there. Rod, and just to give you a comparison to let you know why this is a good panel, this is not just let's hear from the old white guy now. You know, this is a balanced panel because Rod and Karen, 2,200 episodes, 11 years. 2,200 episodes, 11 years. Stuart at Man Listening, 43 episodes, 9 months. Now, you know, carrying over 32 years of broadcast television into podcasting, we ain't all Conan O'Brien, okay? Can't everybody make the migration? It's tough. But what I would say is Patreon, Kickstarter are not the only way. Advertising is not the only way. Sponsorship, not the only way. Subscription, not the only way. And there's one thing I want to mention. As much as I've failed at creating a community or making the right connection on Kickstarter or on, Patreon, I am not your Patreon. I need to learn from you guys. I saw guys putting things in the chat. Greg at Gold 17, TC Rollins at Dirty Talk. Alyssa, I've seen her in like 5 sessions so far. Breakfast in Beauclair. Shauna's starting out at Get Literated. Karen's asking me to be on her podcast. Karen, yes, email me.
Stuart, I know you're wanting to compliment the audience so much, and we can continue doing that.
No, but here's what I want to say. I want to answer their question.
Yeah.
Because they asked the question. When do you go and ask for money? It's never too early. You know, go ahead and ask for money.
And never too late.
And it's never too late. But the thing is, the only way to make money is not through Patreon. That's what I wanted to say, is that you can write a book. You can give away that book to the people who follow you. And surprise, surprise, you can sell that book, you know? And so plenty of people have podcasts. I know a psychologist in Charlotte. They have a wonderful studio in their psychology practice. Is the purpose of that to make money through Patreon or through the advertising? No, it's to get people into the practice. If you're a plumber, electrician, whatever, there are other ways of revenue streams. That's all I was saying.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think to that point, to what everyone's sharing here, folks, if the pandemic has taught us anything, and it's, believe me, taught us a lot of things, good and bad. One of the things is don't put your eggs all in one basket. And that can apply to this session today. We're going to talk in a little bit just about some tactics and tips of how to make the ask, whether it is through Patreon or through PayPal or other donation services or membership services. But before we get into it, again, the reminder that you need to consider your podcast production, just like with social media or with marketing. It's not all in one place where you're promoting your message. Likewise, in monetizing your podcast, it's not all in one place. You can, believe me, you can have it all in one place. But if something goes awry, if Patreon, for whatever reason, like what Karen and Rod were saying, if the Loot Crate or Patreon service goes away for some legal reason, like what we were seeing technically with TikTok a month ago, then what happens? How are you going to pivot? It's good to have a couple eggs in a couple different baskets so that, yes, try to go for a sponsorship, try to go for Patreon or Kickstarter, try to have a merchandise or something like an online e-commerce to sell items. So that way, if like what Rod and Karen were sharing and Stuart's sharing, if something happens to the market, if something happens to a website, you have another way to stay afloat if you are being dependent on monetizing and money. Now, that said, we do want to focus on some of the tactics and tips to be able to encourage donations. So Rod and Karen, you know, just like with the election campaign advertisements we've been seeing, there are a number of ways to promote a message or an action, whether it's with more fear-based language like vote or die or give us your money or we'll go away forever, or more positive messaging for the ask like we hope you join our community, our friends and family and our podcast listeners who come together and support creativity. How have you used language? What kind of language are you using when you're making that ask of your audience?
We actually tell them a lot of times, no donation is too big or too small, because I think sometimes people focus on how big or small it is. But we, you know, it's a running joke, but it's true. We're like, we'll take the money that folds and jingles because it all adds up, you know. So it's one of those things where if you let people know that if they have, regardless of the dollar amount, it will go to a good cause. More people are willing to give versus if they think they have to give a certain dollar amount. A lot of people will be less likely to give.
Karen's talking about like the people that just give for like donations and stuff, which I think is different. Because like, which is one stream, but for us, one of the things is we're big podcast listeners, so we listen to other shows, and you would hear other shows and their like attempts to monetize and their plans and strategies, and you know, you have to kind of be a student of the industry. So if you want to, you know, if you want to do this for a living, or you have aspirations to do this for a living, you got to be paying attention to what other people are up to. I subscribe to a newsletter, Pod News. Like,
it's the best.
Every podcaster should do that. But
that's
anyway,
PODNEWS, folks. It's an amazing newsletter. Sorry, Rod, I just want to share that.
So the thing for us was we wanted to seem like we were adding something, not taking something away.
Agreed.
And that language is very crucial because we listen to other shows that were monetized and they'd be like, okay, so currently maybe we do 2 shows a week. Well, we're going to take one show, we're going to put it behind a paywall, or we talk about these things on our show, or we're not going to talk about them anymore. You have to pay for us to talk about that. Which has worked and does work for some people, but I, as a listener, I never felt motivated by, I felt less motivated by that than we got this brand new idea, you know? And so that's what we wanted to do. So for us, when we started our premium shows behind our paywall, we were like, here's a sports show, here's a movie show, here's a video game and nerd culture show,
here's a cooking show,
here's a cooking show. Like, so we came up with all these ideas of things we will put behind the paywall. And so people that signed on, in addition to just wanting to support us and, you know, making sure I wasn't on unemployment, they also were like, oh yeah, and I like you talking about sports, or I like you interviewing people and stuff like that. The other thing I would add too is during our drive to get enough people so that we could at least, like, at the time it was like, if we can just get, I want to say it was like 75 people was the max, but it started with like 50, right? It started very small. It was like, we can get 50 people to sign up for this, we'll be fine. So what I did was I said, I will get a tattoo, and I was going to get his tattoo on my upper arm. And then that was like, okay, if we get to 50 people, I'll get the tattoo. I've never had a tattoo before. And we got to 50 much faster than I thought. Then I was like, oh snap, I got to get a tattoo. And I was like,
let's raise the number.
Yeah, I was like, well, what if we, and some people were even like, oh man, I wish I didn't have enough time. And I was like, well, okay, I'll get the tattoo. I'll get like the logo letters or something. I'll just get it lower on my arm. Or no, I think I said I get the logo, the picture on my arm, which is a little bit bigger and probably hurts more. And they were like, yeah, we meet that goal. And I was like, okay, well, how about this? I'll get the logo and the picture together and I'll get it lower on my arm, my forearm. And I still have it to this day, but and they met that goal. So like it was kind of like we were all in it together.
Yeah.
In a weird way, except I'm the one that had to go through the pain of getting a tattoo.
Well, but we're happy that you did. You did it for the humor, you did for the fun, you did for the community. And I think so many call outs on what you all are just sharing. So I'll just bullet point list them out for everyone. One is that you were talking with the community, or you had a pulse on your audience to know the kind of things that kind of activate them, the things that get them excited, the things that also tie into your tone as podcasters, but also the kind of content that you're making, that it is on the more, funny side or fun, a humorous side or, connective side through positivity. So I think knowing the pulse of your community, your target audience who's listening, will give you an indication of what kind of tiers, what kind of rewards or gifts to be able to give to them. And by all means, asking them, actually point blank asking them, what all would you want? Or if we have these 3 ideas, which one would you most want to invest in or donate to? The other call outs I would say is, Rod, you said it, set goals, set a goal. You can easily do a nebulous, give us whatever amount of money, that's perfectly fine. But if you also put a goal to it, saying a donation any amount matters, but if we get to 70 people donating, this is the cool thing that's going to happen. Or if we're able to get to $100 total, this is what's going to happen next. And the third thing I'll just share before we pivot to Stuart for some Patreon ideas is that you should be open to any donation. For those who don't know, I work at the WFAE, the NPR station in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you probably are familiar with NPR and PBS and how we do our pledge drives or membership drives. In most cases, our pledge drive, our membership drives, we say any donation matters. Just like every vote matters, any donation of any amount matters. We just want to hear from you. When you make that call to people, you shouldn't expect them to immediately write off a check of $1 million saying, here you go. Think of it as a gradual relationship like you have with a partner. First, you start off with some basic communication, and then the more that you have, the more connection that grows. Maybe it turns into something more, maybe a partnership or best friendship or, marriage or whatever the case may be. So keep time in your schedule to cultivate that relationship and know that at the get-go, when you ask for a donation, it's probably not going to be out of the gate a huge amount of money. If they can donate at any level, a small level, $1 a day, whatever. If you continue cultivating that relationship, then it can grow into something more. And maybe it's more money, or maybe it's more vocal support on social media. So with that said, Stuart, I want to hear from you because we're getting a lot of questions about Patreon, and I want to make sure we address this. What were some of the things that you needed to make sure you had when you were establishing your Patreon page? Because for those who have seen Man Listening's Patreon page, you do have a trailer, you do have a video that's very well produced.
Well, the thing I'm still trying to negotiate is, are you really basically saying, the Kickstarter model and the Patreon model are different.
Yeah.
With the Patreon model, you're saying if you donate, it's just like NPR, PBS. If you donate at a certain level, you get a book or a coffee mug or a T-shirt or whatever. And a lot of times people don't want that. There's the famous tote bag. But in the Kickstarter, you're saying, if you give me $20, I give you a book. And my daughter has done that to some success. With Kickstarter or with Patreon, if it's nebulous, your fans will come out. Like, I believe in elevating the voices of strong women. I believe that we don't hear from enough women. So in my podcast, unlike right now, I shut the hell up, and try to talk to real women and try to listen to them. And sometimes I'm better than others, but that's the whole premise, is that I wanted to be 180 degrees from Rush Limbaugh, right? Somebody who does all the talking, he's angry, denigrates women. I wanted to do very none of the talking, just keep asking questions, Don't have a list of questions, just keep being open to that. Okay, well, that is something that is very much of our day. People are tired of hearing from old white men. Let's just be, I have a huge supporter in Bernadette Joy, who was one of your guests, Joni. And she said, "You're the only old white man in America who doesn't piss me off right now." And I said, "Thank you, Bernadette. Please let me use that quote." And so sometimes if you're like, yes, Greg at a 501c3 foundation, then you may be asking people at NPR, you may be asking people to buy in for an ideal. Okay, you're buying into the ideal of that the voices, the stories of resilient women need to be uplifted. Hey, and in addition, you buy in, I give you a book. Mm-hmm. And you know what the book is about? How one man shut up and started listening.
Well, so speaking of that, Stuart,
the book and the podcast go together. That's what I'm saying. People are asking in the chat. You think I'm just shilling books? It's not that. People are asking in the chat, how do you do this? What are the other ways you raise money? Well, that's the other way that I'm raising money.
Oh, no, and Stuart, I totally understand. I do want to try to keep the conversation to kind of this membership model, though, because obviously, like we mentioned earlier, there are different ways to be able to sell ideas or sell products beyond just this membership or Patreon or Kickstarter or PayPal donations. But with your particular Patreon, just share with us, what are the tiers that you have on? Why did you choose those specific tiers at those levels?
Okay, I went to Podcast Movement, and when it was in Orlando last year before it was virtual, and the Patreon had a whole afternoon of sessions, and they advised against $1. They said, get it up to at least $5. Mm-hmm. And so I put the levels arbitrarily at $7, $21, and $98. I've gotten $98. Just so you know, I'm in it for the long run. And that's, if you take nothing else away from it, I'm really, I'm not here to shill. If you have, 100 listens, don't give up. If you believe in what you're doing, don't give up. If one model doesn't work for you, don't give up. If you believe in what you're doing, keep doing it. Keep putting it out there, and it'll find its audience. It really will. You'll find your people, but don't quit before the miracle. And so I had $7, $21, and $98. And, Rod and Karen are an enormous success. I am not a success yet. I am really not a success yet, but stick around, stick around. It's like ivy. It sleeps, it creeps, and then it leaps. And when it leaps, what they're going to do, because it's already happened, a friend of mine, Jeremy Markovich, they go back to look at the original content. They want to binge listen after the fact.
True.
So that hockey stick is real, y'all. You go from arithmetic growth to exponential growth when you hit that right person. And when you say the listeners, it might not be 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 listeners. It might be that you get just the right listener. I'm talking to you, Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon, she's going to be my sugar mama. Witherspoon, Oprah.
Stuart, we look forward to the day where Reese Witherspoon is in your home, Stuart. Yeah. So we have a lot of really great questions from the audience, and again, for those joining us, feel free, any questions that you have to Stuart, Rod, and Karen about how they've been able to achieve or receive donations, by all means, feel free to put them in the comments below. Realistically, I'd love to get into the numbers. For Rod and Karen, are you seeing a lot of local donations? I mean, if you were to say just in 1 year alone, what's the average donation that you're seeing, and maybe the largest amount of money you've seen through, PayPal?
So I don't know about local donations. Do you mean like in Charlotte?
Mm-hmm. Charlotte, North Carolina, local because of geographically where you all are located.
Well, that's what's interesting, right? When we started the show, we never really thought of what we were doing as a local show.
We just put it out. And the thing is, when you first start, you're speaking and you don't know that it's an audience out there, because
Well, I think they do now.
they do now,
Yeah,
but when
but
we
we
started,
didn't.
we didn't know. It was you put it in the void and you didn't know somebody loved it until they told you. They didn't tell you, you just thought you were speaking to nobody.
And so, and now they have better tracking tools, all this stuff.
Yes.
But anyway, the point being, we didn't really get into the local community. Like, we thought of it as this thing we're putting on the internet and anyone can listen to it. And it kind of is what it was. Like, we would get people from other countries who were like, I'm Black, I'm in Japan, I'm losing my mind, I don't talk to other Black people, I don't know what's happening in the United States, I get my news through other sources. Thank you for your show, you make me feel at home. And so we probably wasted, in a certain way, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years of the show just thinking of it as not a thing where we need to go out in our local area and be like, let's do this live show here. Let's talk. Let's get on the map for Charlotte specifically.
Yeah.
And North Carolina specifically. We never really thought of it that way. So I don't know what the percentage of local donations would be, but just because we never tracked that, I know we get some.
Yes.
And there obviously are people that are, especially since we started doing more locally and people started writing about podcasts and they put us in these like, hey, Charlotte podcast, do you know about this?
Yeah, we didn't even know that there was a list. Like, now we've been to the library, we've done the blue.
Yeah.
So we do more local things now to kind of get our voices out there.
Yeah, so I don't know the specific thing. I will say that donations versus like our actual like subscribers and stuff, donations are probably like maybe like 20% of what our subscribers give or something, maybe even less. So
and what about the average donation that you're saying?
Oh,
I mean, is it a few dollars?
The average donation is somewhere between like probably like $5 is like your average kind of thing. Maybe, you know, we have some people that give less. The thing for us is we just shout everyone out the same no matter what.
Right.
And I think the largest donation we've ever received, I mean, maybe like someone just gave like $1,000 once or something, just out of nowhere. They were just like, here's $1,000, and like they might leave a note or something. And you know, like, and it's never like something we did. It's just, you know, like, I don't know, maybe they hit the lottery. I don't know. But you know, obviously we've been doing this 11 years, so I guess there would be some variance. But your average donation, you know, smaller than that. You know, maybe like I said, somewhere between $0 and $5 or whatever.
And you all are still not using anything but PayPal. You're not moving to Patreon. You're not moving to another service.
Right.
Why is that?
It was the easiest to set up at the time. We have like a history with them now. It's all, you know, attached to our bank accounts, blah, blah, blah. The Patreon thing will require us to basically start our paywall thing over there. So we have a paywall that goes directly to our site, and we like that because we it's our content, the maintenance of it, all that stuff. And so a lot of it's about control. And we're still, you know, no matter who you do business through on the internet, you're still at the whims and mercy of something, right? So this is not like the magic bullet. Like, we didn't just be like, PayPal is perfect. Like, a PayPal tomorrow could be like, we don't like this thing and we would have to move somewhere else. But I know Patreon, when it started, also, it was like, I don't know, like 6-7 years into what we were doing.
Yeah, so we had
been monetized for a couple of years. And even though they make it easier and take I think maybe a slightly higher percentage, they make it a little bit easier to do it. We just didn't want to tell all of our listeners, okay, y'all, we're going over here now. So if you've been giving money here, stop giving money, which is, you never want to tell them that. And then start over here. Because what if they just go, I'm good. That's a lot of work. So.
For those asking in the comments what a paywall is referring to, similar to how some news agencies like the New York Times, Washington Post, or even WTF Mark Maron have it, at a certain point, you can't get the content for free anymore, especially if it's the archived content, the archived episodes from years prior, months prior. So basically, paywall is that it's literally a wall that it sets up sometimes if you're trying to get access to information, and they say, well, you have to pay, you have to just subscribe, you have to make a donation in order to access what you're wanting. So that's what that answer is for what is a paywall. Folks, we have about 17 minutes left together. We have a ton of really great questions. So I'm going to dive in and ask them to our panel. So this one, I'll definitely go towards Stuart, but then also Rod and Karen, feel free to chime in. Tell us a little bit about the levels, the benefits, the low-level benefits, and have they worked out well for your individual, productions and encouraging donations?
No, precisely because I didn't have a good idea of what it was that people wanted. So, Rod and Karen.
Oh, actually, Stuart, before you go, so tell us, what are the low level? What were like the benefits or the rewards with the low levels? Were they stickers?
At $98, with the lower ones, I said, do you want a t-shirt? What do you want? Do you want bonus content? And they were like, we just want you to keep doing what you're doing. That's what I heard. And so I kept doing what I was doing. And I said, well, someday if you want a t-shirt, if you want something. And so now what I'm doing is every one of them, even if they dropped off, I'm going to send them a book, and I'm going to ask them to review the book on Amazon. So that way, it becomes content marketing, essentially. That's it. It becomes content marketing. Like, it's not, the content doesn't just serve to try to get subscribers or to try to get money. It serves as content marketing for other media platforms. That's it.
Yeah. Ron and Karen?
And I know for us, like we said before, if you do like the regular PayPal donation, we give you a shout out on the show. But as far as like things behind the paywall, you get a lot of content. We have one flat fee for that. We're not divided into levels.
Well, no, technically we do have tiers, because we have a 1 year subscription is a certain amount, a monthly subscription is a certain amount. And then occasionally we have sales.
Yeah, we do sales.
And so because we can coordinate it ourselves and be like, hey, for this amount of time, we're doing a pandemic sale. So
that was fun.
Everything, we make like wacky advertisements and stuff and try to make it,
really
funny
fun,
and stuff like that. So there are tiers. Now the thing is, you get the same thing essentially for each tier. Like, you're gonna get behind the paywall, which is where we want you to be. And Stuart brought up something good when he brought up the book. The thing is, with us too, we have merch through which is another revenue stream through TeePublic. But we've been to several different t-shirt sites and stuff and done that. So like, you are kind of always selling yourself no matter what you're doing. If we're on this panel right now, we're selling ourselves. If we're on another show, wherever you hear kind of and another thing he said too, when he talked about his Patreon and how people are supporting because they're supporting the mission, even with us having a thing that we're giving you, you're still supporting the mission of us. You're still supporting this idea, this cause of us. So we're even, we have a lot of people who are like, I can't even keep up with everything you do, but I just want you to exist. So I'm just signing up for whatever because I need you to be around.
Yeah. We have a question here for Clark, and I'll direct this to Stuart. Clark's wondering about numbers of patrons. And I guess just more broadly, Stuart, if you can answer that question, but also just what would you change about the Patreon process for yourself and your podcast man listening moving forward?
Well, if it comes to getting 60, 75 people in a room at the Evening Muse for a podcast launch party, they have a blast. For some reason, I have a disconnect between my ability to build community at that kind of level and doing it online in the digital space. And some people are magical at creating digital communities, Facebook groups or that kind of thing. But if you asked them to have 10 people come to dinner, nobody would show up. So it is a discrete skill, I will say that. And I need to figure out how to translate my skill at organizing the Watson family reunion or a podcast launch party or whatever it is, where I can do that in real life. I can fill a room, I can get people to come out for an ice cream social or whatever, but for some reason, I haven't been able to translate that into the digital space. And that it's a knack, it really is. It's a skill set you can learn. I think you can teach an old dog new tricks. It's the reason I'm in podcasting and not in broadcasting. I think you can, operate in these new spaces and do really kinds of creative things. I just haven't figured that out yet because I'm a little baby, taking little baby steps.
So we all start somewhere, and I think to the point that Rod and Karen were sharing earlier, there's no, and Stuart as well, there's no wrong time to ask for donations. Even if at the get-go you don't get any, keep asking, keep putting it out there, because if you don't say anything, your listeners are not going to be mind readers. So
Right.
make sure you're sharing about it on social media. Make sure that you have it on your website. Make sure you mention it on your podcast and in your liner notes or your website description. So that way they know whatever way they're talking or listening or seeing you and your information, you're saying, I would hope that you support this production if you enjoy it. And we'll see you next week on the episode. So just to be sure, Stuart, Ron and Karen mentioned the percentage of subscribers versus how many donations or donors they have. In your case, what are you seeing with Patreon? How many people are donating versus how many people are listening to Man Listening?
Number of people listen, we're at about, between 200 and 400 downloads. So we're at about, we average a little over 300 downloads. That's been kind of flat. I'm thinking the book has manlistening.com on every other page. It has video elements, which are free. It has audio elements throughout the book, has photographs throughout the book. So the purpose of the book is to function as an immersive media thing and to backload people into the podcast. And so the book is not simply a transcription. This is not Howard Stern. This is not Mark Maron. This is not just a transcription of these women that I have talked to. It's, women who were important. It's a memoir. It's women who were important in my life, formative, my birth mother, my mom, my wife of almost 40 years, my 3 daughters, my 2 sisters, so it's very personal. But at the end of many of the chapters is the little Man Listening logo, the little male and female symbols made into a headset. Okay. And so with the female symbol doing the talking and the microphone and the male symbol doing the listening. So the whole purpose is for people to say, watch, listen, and learn. Go to this link and you can hear a 5-minute video clip. Go to this link and you can hear 30, 45 minutes of this woman come to life and tell her story. Not Stuart talking about her, but her telling in her own words. Not talking about Stuart, talking about her. And that is golden. That's the brand right there. Listening to her, not me.
So just to be sure, Stuart, what's the percentage breakdown between listener? You said around 400 downloads per episode, 300. Okay.
About 20. So 1 in 20.
Okay. And I guess a question for everyone here then is that at what point are you feeling
20? 1 in 10, 1 in 20, something like that.
Okay. So at this point then, realistic expectations that you should give to the audience as they're thinking about making that ask. What are things that you recommend they consider as they're drafting this language, as they're looking towards Patreon or PayPal for the platform support?
The critical thing that we're all trying to do, and I bet Rod and Karen can talk about this, is reach the point at which you have a sort of a critical mass. Like, oh, this is gonna work. Like, this is sustainable. And I would love to hear them talk about that, because I'm not there yet. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wishing and hoping and praying and trying and working and writing books and pushing. They're my heroes. Okay. I mean, they're when I grow up, I want to be them. So
I think for us, one of the things was, I remember researching this when we were going to start the paywall thing. And it was like, the average amount of response you can expect from your audience as far as support is 1%.
Yes.
And so I was looking at our downloads at the time. I was like, 1%? I don't know how we're going to make that work. And since then, there's been so much more research. But with podcasting, it's a little bit higher. So instead of like 1%, it might be like 5%, depending on how interactive you are with your audience and how much you're good at creating these communities online and all that stuff. It can be even higher, So I think when you start, the realistic goal is, at least for me, I always try to set the bar low. So like, look at thinking, okay, I'm getting 100 downloads. If I can get 3 people to sign on to this, there's I think Stuart says he's 9 months in. So that like getting 20 people to sign up for something that's only been there for 9 months is good. But
Yeah.
like
Yes.
you know, like the thing is, if you're only comparing yourself to people that have been doing it longer, or what, or you know, or someone's a comedian and they bring in their comedian audience to their podcast, then because that was something we had to make sure we didn't do. You know, it's like we didn't want to be like, well, Mark Maron did so and so. It's like, well, Mark Maron's like a whole dude, you know what I
Yes,
mean? And
with-
we're
with
just
the-
two people.
with the
Yep.
built-in audience. And I think a lot of times people become discouraged because they actually set their goals too high, and this they compare. It's like comparing
Right.
apples to oranges.
It's like you're making yourself a failure in your mind. You haven't failed. You haven't. The only time you really fail, in my opinion, is if you stop doing it. If you stop putting a product out, you failed yourself. So and it could be as simple as a thing happened. I know for us, it's been a constant steady growth, but there've been bumps and jumps where like we get featured on HBO, on Vice News, a jump. My friend Bomani Jones might shout us out on ESPN or something. We get a little jump from that. And it's just a series of that. But the main thing was that we were consistent and consistently creating and consistently interacting with our audience. If you want to, like, your main secret is you're always selling yourself, and that means online, that means on panels, on wherever you're at. So do that.
Yeah, and one more thing. The biggest thing is you have got to learn how to get over your fear and self-promote.
Yep.
Because we've been doing this long enough where we talk about people, we bring them on as guests, and they literally downplay everything that they're doing. I was like, we brought you here to reach your audience. Self-promote, because if you don't promote you, nobody else will.
We'll have a comedian on. We'll be like, so where can they find you? And they're just like, no. I'm like, you were so confident for an hour. Like, give them, they want to hear you. Tell them where to go.
Yeah.
Can I say amen to something about that?
Yeah.
The best place to promote podcasts is on other podcasts.
Yep.
Right.
It is. It's one of the biggest. We've had a few marketing sessions over the course of the month about this, and word of mouth referrals like that. One of the best ways, and usually one of the easiest ways and free ways for you to grow a community, or grow, I should say, an audience, which then can transition into a community when you're consistent in connecting with them and reaching out to them and listening to them, whether it's by encouraging ratings and reviews on podcast apps, emails, audio voice messages or voicemails, social media comments, you name it. So folks, we're getting towards the end. A few rapid fire questions for our panel. The one thing I want to ask, we've gotten a couple questions about, is LLC. So in both cases, in both your different podcasts, did you or are you currently an LLC when it comes to monetization?
Yes.
Okay, why is that? Just give a brief recap of why that is for those who may be interested.
Money. I need it. I'm for profit.
And also it helps with your taxes and stuff too. Whether you want to write something off a certain way, your expenses, and then like if you go into it, because we looked at other models like proprietorship, sole proprietorship, partnership, your taxes are higher. So really it was like this, like our accounting people were like, no, just go with this LLC, just trust me, baby. And it worked out.
Yeah, and it's also a thing too. When you first start, a lot of people first start. We've seen people, they want to do everything. They want to buy the website. They want to do like hundreds of things. Start off small to see
if you have the money, do that.
Yeah, because we didn't have the money.
We did not have that option.
Some people didn't. Most people start, they don't have that money to invest into an LLC. So that's why I'm saying that the average person can't be like, here's a few $100, I want an LLC.
Yeah, I think it's changed over time though, because now like people go into it with the awareness of the industry.
That's true. We didn't know.
So it was like people were like giving us money and stuff, and we were like, what should we do with this? You know, and at some point, if you get enough money, PayPal got to report it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Patreon got to send something to the tax man, like, hey, they get money, y'all. So you want to make sure that you got that covered on your side.
Yes.
Yeah. So folks, I do want to bring up one thing, and this is kind of a recap of what today's conversation has been like, what this hour's conversation has been like. Hopefully everyone can see the screen share. Just some final thoughts for you as you're thinking, again, whether you're a new podcaster out in the audience, an existing podcaster, you're wanting to monetize your podcast, get donations, get on Patreon, you name it. Some basic considerations, a lot of which we've talked about in a few different ways on today's hour session. It helps when you have an existing fan base or community, because when you're able to make that ask, then you'll probably see a quicker result in the donations that you're getting, because you've already formed an authentic relationship and one-to-one, personhood or companionship or relationship, what have you, with the audience. So it's okay if you don't have an already built up audience at the get-go when you are launching a Patreon, but just know that it could take a little longer. You just need to make sure that you are talking to them, you're listening to their needs and how much they're able to donate and when they're able to donate. If you can, post a video to your Patreon or social media, be concise about the ask, whether it's a seasonal ask, a new gift that you're putting into the rotation for them to donate to receive, you name it. But again, we only have so much time in our day to listen to a podcast, let alone hear, spiel about why we should give up our hard-earned dollars. So make it matter, make it count. Be exact about why it matters that they donate and how they donate and where and when. Something that Stuart and Rod and Karen have mentioned over the course of this call, look at other membership models for podcasting. Look at other Patreons. Look at other productions and how they're setting up their donation campaigns or their membership campaigns, the pledge levels or the donation levels and rewards. Maybe it doesn't necessarily need to inform exactly what you do, but maybe there are things that tie in exactly to what you're doing or what you want to be when it comes to a community-funded podcast. Set realistic goals and expectations for yourself. That's a great way to have a strategy, is that you're not just saying, oh, we'll do whatever. Set a goal, even if it's something just for yourself no one knows about. Set a goal and try to reach it. Be open to different tiers of donations. Be mindful also of shipping costs for rewards and items. Sometimes it costs more money to ship out a t-shirt than a sticker. Be mindful of that when you're putting that into the cost of the tier. Promote everywhere. Wherever you are, put a promotion that you are doing donations, that you're asking for support, and also thank people. Even if it's a personalized thank you note, an email, a shout out on a podcast, a mention on the website or video, whatever you can do to share that you appreciate them and that you are so thankful for what they're doing to keep this production up and alive. I'm going to share this slide in the notes for this presentation, so don't worry, you'll have access to it, but wanted to share just a wrap up. So folks, we're wrapping up the session. It's been an hour conversation. The session has been recorded. It will be made available at the end of this week, so keep an eye on your emails, your spam, junk promotions folders for it. Rod and Karen, final words, and Stuart, we'll wrap up with you, final words, but Rod and Karen first, final words for our audience as they go forth and Patreon prosperly.
I would say definitely thank you, for having us. Thank you for the audience.
Thank you.
I think that thankfulness one was really key because we've listened to shows where like they just were like, you owe me this money, and people just checked out. So you definitely want to stay thankful. We appreciate y'all for having us. And if you're a podcaster and you're listening to this, everything we said, like we started 2 people in a spare bedroom, 1 microphone, playing music through our computer speakers. Okay. So anything is possible.
Yes, it is.
But you gotta work it.
Yeah, I absolutely. Ditto, 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 whether you're an NPR production or at home who's been able to rise to the success of getting a Spotify deal. Absolutely ditto. Stuart, final words from you, final words of encouragement for our audience as they go forth and they try to bring their podcast productions to life in a community way.
What Rod and Karen taught me was keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. Consistency. Get it out there. Don't get discouraged. You got this. You got this. One day you're going to look back at this and you're going to say, remember when we had, 10 listeners? Remember when we didn't have no money? Keep on keeping on.
Yeah. I ditto.
Oh,
I think
one more thing.
Of course.
Have fun. If you're not having fun doing what you're doing, you're going to, even if you made $1 million or you make no money, if you're not having fun, it sucks. So make sure you're having fun first and foremost.
Yep. At the end of the day, you don't have to do podcasting. So why are you doing it in the first place? That should be the number one thing you consider as you make a podcast. Why are you doing it? And what is it going to be to you at the end of the day? A passion project, a hobby, a full-time career like Rod and Karen, or a way to be able to monetize and help with the book launch like Stuart has to some degree. So your goal matters. Folks, we're at the end of the hour. Thank you to every single person attending today's session. And thank you, of course, to Rod and Karen, the host of the Black Guy Who Tips, a Spotify exclusive podcast now. That is amazing work, community-driven work. And Stuart Watson, who is the host of Man Listening, and also the upcoming book, Stuart, there you go. What she said and what I heard, like on cue. Thank you, Stuart. For those that are wondering, because we're on a session about monetization and membership, funny enough, this session, this entire month of sessions for the Charlotte Podcast Festival have been free and open to the public, because we value you all out there, wherever you are, however way you're making podcasts. We want to inspire you and connect you to others and make sure you're doing the best you can. If you value this, if you're able to donate any amount of money, if you're able to donate $10 per month, it matters in keeping this free and accessible to all, no matter your experience level in podcasting. You can make a donation on our website, which is charlottepodcastfestival.com. You can even pick up a t-shirt, super soft and locally made in Charlotte, a memento of your experience, at charlottepodcastfestival.com. A lot of our folks attending have already worn their shirts to sessions. That's been so exciting to see. So again, charlottepodcastfestival.com to get that t-shirt. I've been your moderator, Joni Deutsch. I've been so honored to be here with our accomplished panelists, and I hope to see you all at the end of this month for our podcast happy hour. It's a great time to mix and mingle with other podcasters, learn and grow and connect. You can register for it on charlottepodcastfestival.com, and make sure to keep an eye on your emails for this recording at the end of this week. I'm done talking. My lungs need a break. I think everyone's ears need a break, but we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us, and we will see you super soon at the Charlotte Podcast Festival or in podcast land. Bye, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.